Jerry Greenfield, I'd like to bring you into this discussion. You're the co-founder with Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's. Can you talk about your fight in Vermont, how you got involved with this? Now, this is a moratorium on crops in Maui. You were fighting in Vermont for labeling. That's what failed in Oregon and Colorado on Tuesday, the attempt to get GMOs labeled. What happened to you guys at the beginning?
Well, the fight for mandatory GMO labeling has been going on for a few years in several different states around the country, and there's actually activity still going on in 20-some-odd states. In Vermont, we went the legislative route. So Ben & Jerry's was actively involved in that, but there's a great coalition here in Vermont of nonprofit groups, the Vermont Right to Know, that was incredibly active, and it was essentially citizens getting in touch with legislators. The Vermont said it was the most phone calls and contact they got about any issue. People are really passionate about the right to know what's in their food, and that's what the issue is here, is simply about the consumer's right to know. It's about transparency and being honest, so people have the right to choose what sort of foods they want to buy and eat themselves and feed their families.
At the beginning, you lost. I mean, Monsanto, explain the argument against labeling that the companies use. I mean, you weren't even saying anything should be banned, that just that people should know.
Great, or GMOs are horrible, that you should like GMOs or not like GMOs. It's simply about being able to know. And what the giant food industry companies, Monsanto, some of the chemical companies say is that it's going to add huge costs to your food bills, which is simply not true. They spend millions of dollars trying to convince people that it's going to make your food more expensive, whereas in truth, changing a label on a food package costs essentially nothing. A company like Ben & Jerry's changes its containers all the time, whether it's for new ingredients, new marketing claims, whatever. It's something you simply do in the normal cost of business, and there's no increased cost at all. There's no saying that any companies need to change their ingredients or do anything differently. It's simply about being honest and telling consumers what's in your food.
And Jerry Greenfield, is Ben & Jerry's opposed to GMOs per se?
No, Ben & Jerry's doesn't really take a position on that. We always say we're not scientists. You know, there really haven't been independent studies, but our issue is simply about transparency, having a consumer have the right to know. You know, it's funny. We are really proud of the ingredients we use, and we're thrilled to tell people about it. And it's just so hard to imagine that other food companies wouldn't want to be talking about what's in their products.
And what about this issue of cost, Jerry, that the companies raise? And they say, you know, we're going to be put out of business if we have to label products. What's happened with Ben & Jerry's in that way? I mean, your battle began again wanting to label RBGH, right, recombinant bovine growth hormone in the milk that was used?
Yeah, that was about 20 years ago. Well, you know, so first of all, that argument that it's going to cost more money is simply made up. All of these food companies do business in countries around the world where there's labeling. There's currently labeling in 64 countries. All these giant multinational food companies do business there, and they are doing just fine. Consumers Union, which puts out consumers reports, did a study for this last election in Oregon and discovered that adding labeling would cost about $3 a year to consumers' bills. So that's essentially nothing. And Ben & Jerry's is right now finishing up its transition to become all non-GMO ingredients. So we'll be done with that by the year. And that transition to all non-GMO ingredients is not going to raise the cost of a pint at all to a consumer. So it can be done. Certainly there's work involved, and for Ben & Jerry's to make this conversion, you need to work with your suppliers, and you need to actually put some time and energy into it, but it doesn't need to cost more to the consumer.
Dr. Pang, I'd like to ask Dr. Pang, why do you think that the measure passed in Maui, but less aggressive measures, simply labeling efforts, failed in Colorado and Oregon?
Because on Maui, we deal with, we think it's experimental GM farming. And we feel that this experimental nature is more aggressive or threatening to us. We are beyond labeling. When they do this genetic modifications farming, open air farming here, we know, because I'm a party to the class action suit, that the use of pesticides, the amount and the types of use is enormous. I've never seen such combinations used before. They cannot contain it. It's going off into the water. It's drifting into the schools, into our environment, or into our oceans. And we don't have the right, we don't see it. We don't know when it's coming, and people get sick. Plus, if they ever were to grow GM food here, now they grow GM seed corn, that's not even food. We're supposed to feed ourselves. And we're growing something to ship somewhere else to grow to feed their animals. So for us, it's really more of an environmental health issue, and we cannot seem to control it. It's going beyond their borders. That is why we've taken a more aggressive approach.
And Jerry Greenfield, in Vermont, you also have been active in those fights for labeling in Oregon and Colorado. Why do you think they went down? What are the biggest battles here? They also went down in California and in Washington State. Enormous amounts of money, millions being put in by the companies.
Yeah, in Oregon, the most recent ballot initiative just last Tuesday, the opponents to GMO labeling spent over $20 million, and the yes forces spent less than $8 million. So the people fighting against consumers' right to know are spending enormous amounts of money, and they're just blanketing television and the airwaves with messages that it's going to cost consumers more money, it's going to be confusing. They just want to put doubt into consumers' minds so that they won't take action. And unfortunately, it seems to be really effective. I mean, even in a state like Washington State, which last year had a ballot initiative that narrowly failed, where once again, the spending by the opposition far outweighed the spending for the four. The ballot initiative lost by under 2 percentage points, but they did polling after the ballot initiative failed, and it showed that 2/3 of the people still wanted to have labeling. They just were convinced by all this advertising that the bill wasn't right, or seeds of doubt were sowed in their minds, but people still favor labeling. They want it. It's just that
Jerry,
this enormous advertising.
We just have a minute, and we just came out of the most expensive midterm elections in history, right? $4 billion. Ben & Jerry's and you personally are opposed to money in politics. How do you link the whole issue of GMOs to the issue of money in politics and what's called corporate personhood, if you could explain that?
Due to a couple of recent Supreme Court decisions, corporations are now considered to be expenditures for elections. And this GMO labeling is all part of the same thing. You have these unlimited corporate expenditures to try to influence elections, and it's completely undermining our democracy.
Well, Jerry, I want to thank you for being with us, as well as Dr. Lauren Pang, involved in the Maui struggle, one of 5 co-sponsors of Maui's successful GMO moratorium initiative. Jerry Greenfield is co-founder of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, which has campaigned for GMO labeling measures. Special thanks to our friends at Vermont PBS in Colchester, where Jerry was speaking.